We are now just about to get into the thick of seed starting, which means that now is a great time to talk about different sustainable or eco-friendly ways that you can be starting seeds. If you don't know already, I'm a really big advocate for sustainability and reducing the amount of plastic that you use in your garden. And so in this video, I wanted to give you 6 different ways that you can be more sustainable or environmentally friendly. Most of them are related to reducing your plastic usage. And so I want to take you through all of those today, since now is a great time to be focusing on this. If you're new here, my name is Bree from Urban Gardening Canada, and I garden in Ottawa Zone 5. And these are tips that I implement in my own garden, and I consider them to be very important. One of the benefits of all of these tips is that they don't compromise the quality of your seedlings. And to me, that's a really important factor, is to make sure that the results that you get from implementing these more sustainable options don't compromise the quality of your seedlings or don't set you back to the point where you have to go out and buy seedlings from a greenhouse or garden center. And so with that, let's get into the first tip, and that is to make your own seed starting soil. And so there's a few reasons why this is a sustainable option compared to buying it. And that is because, one, if you make your own soil, you are going to be making it in bulk, which means that there's going to be less plastic overall from the packaging that you're buying. But also, this seed soil recipe uses no peat in it at all, and peat is really damaging on the environment. So I've done a video on how to make this peat-free seed starting soil, and I'm going to link that in the description below. And in that video, I go more into depth on what is the issue with peat and how it's not environmentally friendly, so you can check it out in that video. But what I love about making my own seed starting soil is, one, it's way cheaper because I'm buying it in bulk and mixing it myself. 2, because you're buying all of the ingredients and putting them together, there's no fungus gnats in the soil, which means you are not constantly battling these gnats, which can be super irritating during the seed starting process. And not only that, they can affect your seedlings as well. I've also grown seedlings before that had aphids in the soil, and because you're buying all of these sterile, separated products, you don't actually have to worry about any weeds or pests being in your soil either. And the final thing is that once you know how to make your own seed starting soil, you can actually modify this recipe to be a potting soil. So when you're ready to upgrade your plants from that seed starting soil, you can just adjust the ratio and turn it into a potting soil, which means that, again, you don't have to go out and buy any more products. You can actually make it yourself. And this way you can control the nutrition that exists inside of your product. So next up is another favorite of mine, and that is making your pots out of newspaper. And so there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can build round newspaper pots, but I love the square version of them. I've also made a video on how to make these square newspaper pots, so I will link that in the description below as well. But what I love about these is that because they're square, they fit into your tray really well and there's no wasted space. And they also have a flat bottom on them, which means that they're not going to tip over while you're working with them. And this is important because when your seedlings tip over and make a huge mess, there's nothing more irritating than that. And so this avoids that completely. And as I mentioned in the other video, I'll mention it quickly, is just make sure that the ink on your newspaper wherever you are is plant-based, because you don't want to be putting chemicals into your garden. Because of course, when you're making newspaper pots, you can actually plant these directly into the soil, into your garden. And so it saves a step from having to pull them out of the pots. And because they're biodegradable, the roots will actually push through these newspaper pots, and that helps air prune them, which makes your plants a heck of a lot healthier than if they're just circling the bottom of a plastic pot. And you can also water them from the bottom. So just pouring water in a tray and letting that newspaper soak up the water and water your soil slowly. So these are just a win-win-win in my opinion, and these replace plastic pots. And then the benefit of replacing plastic pots with the newspaper ones is that you have nothing to store or clean up after the seedlings go into your garden. You don't have to store the pots, you don't have to wash the pots, nothing. They're automatically going right into the garden. And then you have the rest of the season to collect flyers from your local grocery store or from your mailbox, and then you can store those for later to recreate new pots for the following season. They're just amazing for the fact that they go straight into the ground and you don't have to store anything. All right, so another way that you can avoid plastic pots is by using toilet paper rolls or even paper towel rolls that you cut up. This is a really good one if you are growing something that has deep tap roots, such as broad beans, where they need a lot of extra space. So the thing that I don't love about these is that they do tip over, or if you don't fold the bottom of it over, then all of the soil can come out of it. So what I find that these are best for is to actually place them inside of another pot just to give that extra height where you can add more soil into them. But you can actually just choose to use these alone, where you can either place them in the tray and then fill them up and plant your seeds into it, or you can cut the bottom of it, fold it in half, and then place it into the tray. And so this is another thing that you can plant directly into the garden. It will biodegrade on its own. You don't have to disturb the roots for plants such as okra that don't like it, and you don't have to store any pots or clean any pots, and they are just going to go away, and you have a supply all year long to collect back up again. So before I move into the next tip, I just wanted to mention that I have a newsletter that you can sign up for. It goes out twice a month, and each newsletter I come up with a unique topic to teach you something new, whether it's about the hierarchy of chickadees or the NPK of your soil and how to determine if you are short on one of them. And also in my newsletter, I let you know what's new on the blog, new on YouTube, and often give a long-range forecast or tips on what you can do in your garden. So if you're interested in signing up for my newsletter, I'll leave that in the link below. But otherwise, you can also get a lot of these articles on my website. So for example, if you want to make a newspaper pot and the video is too fast for you, I have an article with the instructions on how to make these square newspaper pots on my website. So you'll definitely want to check it out, whether you're signing up for my newsletter or checking out one of my how-to articles. And let's get into the next tip. All right, so the next alternative to plastic pots is a soil blocker. And so this is a really great tool because now you only have to store this one soil block. And so the good thing is you don't have to spend time making newspaper pots, collecting toilet paper rolls, or even holding on to a million plastic pots that you have to wash. You just have this one soil blocker that you can wash at the end of the season and put it away and grab it for the next season. The biggest issue with the soil blocker is that there is a learning curve on how to use it, how much water needs to go into your soil in order for it to hold together, and then having to use the manual hand gesture of having to make these soil blocks. But otherwise, this is a really great alternative. They are a little expensive upfront. They can be up to $50 depending on where you buy it from, and you might want to get more than one size. So it can be an expensive upfront cost, but you're going to keep it forever. And so you do have to remember that you may be spending money now, but you're never going to have to spend money again in the future. And so this is a really great alternative to having any other type of plastic pot. Okay, so moving away from the plastic pots, I want to talk about single-use plastics. So for example, using resealable sandwich bags. A lot of people use these where they put in a wet paper towel with their seeds into a resealable plastic bag to help sprout your seeds. And so this is another thing that I don't recommend using. Instead, choose a closable sandwich container. It's going to do the exact same job. So as long as you have the container and a lid, you can wet your paper towel, add your seeds to it, and close up this container. And then you can use this again later. So that way you're not using a bag that you're just going to throw out, because these plastic bags last in the landfill for hundreds of years, and for such a short period of time, it just doesn't make sense to be using these when you have access to any other type of reusable container that has a lid on it that's going to do the exact same job. And this is the same for any of those plastic cups that people are growing in. So if you use those, I hate these for multiple reasons, including the fact that they taper at the bottom, so they're constantly tipping over. I cannot stand them, but they also leach chemicals into your soil. And if you are an organic grower, it just does not make sense to be using a product that is leaching chemicals into your soil, because what's the difference between spraying pesticides in your garden or using a container that's leaching chemicals? And the other thing is that these products break down into microplastics that are going into your soil, going into the waterways, and going into your brain after they've had those studies that show that we have a credit card's worth of plastic in our bodies. It just doesn't make sense to be using these when there's alternatives such as using a soil blocker. And the same goes for using cling wrap as a way to be having a dome on your plants to be able to create humidity. I've seen so many people on the internet, and I die inside a little bit when you're using a plastic cup with cling wrap on top of it when you can really be investing in better quality products such as a tray with your soil block squares in it or your newspaper pots in it, and then buying a dome that goes on top of it that you're going to use year after year. And so this is a product that you're investing in now that's going to last you for multiple years versus cling wrap, plastic cups, or resealable bags are all going to just be used for this one seed starting season and they're being thrown out. And this goes for milk jugs. If you're winter sowing, just throw your seeds in the garden and they are going to germinate. But whenever you have plastic going through the elements, especially in Canada or any of the colder regions where you've got hot days, cold days, below freezing, snow, freezing rain, this is breaking down the plastic and it is going to leach into your soil. So again, if you are trying to grow organic, choosing products that are leaching or breaking down just do not make sense, because at this point you may as well stop growing organic and doing it the conventional way. And so this just doesn't make sense. And so my final little bonus tip is to skip out on the trendy hacks that you see on the internet. So right now, one of the ones that I've seen is the seed snail, where it's supposed to save you a ton of space, which it just doesn't. And people are taking foam that you get from the dollar store or from a shipping store, and they're laying out their soil and placing seeds in it and rolling it up. But the reality is that you can be sowing your seeds into a container of soil really tightly, and it's going to take up the exact same amount of space as this seed snail does. And instead of using this foam that literally is going to garbage and it's going to break down and leach these chemicals, you have a container that you can use again. And you may be saving space in the moment that it's in the snail, but the minute you have to pot it up, you better have space on your trays or your shelving unit for all of these seedlings that you grew in the original space saving section. And so I really recommend that if you see something trendy that's considered a hack on the internet, really think about it through the perspective of, is this environmentally friendly or is it leaching chemicals into my soil? Because you really don't want those chemicals in your body. They're so disruptive on you. And the reality is that we have been gardening for thousands of years before plastic existed, before social media existed, before these hacks existed. We know how to do this, and our bodies and our minds know how to do it. And it doesn't require any of these hacks to be successful. So just go through with your intuition and understand how to do this, and make sure that as you're gardening and you rely on nature to be able to grow these plants out in your garden, that you're not disrespecting nature at the same time by creating a bunch of garbage that goes to landfill that is going to be there so much longer, all for a single season. And so really changing your perspective is helpful for you and for all of our future generations. And that is everything for today's video. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and check out this video here. Bye.